Now, without any further delay, I would like to turn today's Autodesk webcast over to your first presenter, Deb Dabrowski. Deb, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Scott, and welcome everybody to today's webcast on the path to BIM for small firms. This is a kind of special webcast. We've been planning this one for a little while, and those of you who may have been to our webcast in the past might have known that we have a survey going that you could answer some questions about BIM in your small workplace, and we're going to address some of that information today. So let me quickly go through the agenda. So we're going to go through some brief introductions. You can get a sense of who is on the webcast team today. And then we are going to ask all of you a few questions so we can get a sense of who's in our audience today. And we'll do that via polling slides. So we'll ask you to answer just a small handful of questions. And then we'll go in through the discussion and demonstration today. So Amy is going to be talking about the path to BIM, especially geared towards small firms, as today's topic indicates. And she'll be doing a little bit of demonstration along the way as well. And then at the end, we'll wrap up and we'll give you some links to additional resources and places where you can go for more information, including a recording of today's session. Okay, so today's webcast team, there's myself, Deb Dabrowski. I'm the Industry Marketing Manager for AEC. We're joined today by Amy Sitkoff, Technical Specialist on the Architecture team. And Amy is going to be really leading the discussion today around the path to BIM for small firms. We're also joined today by Don and Harlan, and they will be in the background today answering all of your questions through Q&A. And so we do encourage you to ask those questions as we go along. Okay, so we do have a few questions for all of you today. The first is we'd love to know if it's your first time attending one of these architecture webcasts, or if you've maybe been to one other one in the past or several other, or maybe you're one of those people that tries to make all of them. I'm going to give a chance for you all to answer the questions here. And again, if you've been to these webcasts, especially maybe some over the past 6 months or so, you'll know that we've had this survey running on the BIM for small firms, and I'm going to go ahead and show the results here. And those of you who answered that survey, and there were quite a few of you, we took all of your responses, and we're going to try to address as much of that as possible. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And if you don't see your question answered today, we do encourage you to ask your question, to send your question to Amy at ask.amy@autodesk.com. Okay, so what design software do you primarily use? We'd love to get a sense of if you are using the current version of AutoCAD Architecture, the 2010 version, or maybe you're using an earlier version of AutoCAD Architecture. Maybe you're using Revit Architecture. So if you're using Revit, you might already be implementing BIM a little bit. Maybe you're on AutoCAD or LT, maybe some other design software. I'm going to go ahead and show the results. Interesting here, so you can see how your colleagues are answering, but it looks like kind of almost an even split amongst those first few categories there. So lots of you using AutoCAD Architecture and quite a few on Revit too. That's great information for us to know as well as we're going through today's webcast. Okay, next question here, and there's just a few more. It's what type of projects do you most often work on? So are you working mostly on residential building projects, maybe landscape architecture? Is your firm, or do you work mostly on interior architecture or design, maybe on commercial building projects or urban design, maybe other? I'm going to go ahead and start answering that. I'll go ahead and show the results. You can see how your colleagues are answering here. Lots of folks, about half of you on commercial building projects and quite a few on residential. Great. Okay. I close this poll. Now we're going to ask about the size of your firm. So we know today's topic is geared towards small firms, although we expect, there's probably several of you out there that are working for maybe medium-sized firms. Maybe you're in that 6 to 24, 25 to 50 category. Maybe a larger firm, 50 plus. Maybe you're calling today from a university or educational institution, wanting to learn a little bit more about BIM and the small firm environment. Maybe you're one of those folks who between jobs, and I think we all know lots of people fall into that category as well these days. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show the results. We got close to half of you working in very small firms, the 1 to 5 employees, and a good smattering amongst the other categories. So Thanks. Again, this really, your responses here really do help us. Not only is Amy's formulating her discussion today, but also just to know who's attending these webcasts so we can think of topics for the future. And the last question here is, which topic would you be most interested in attending in the future? So if we were to offer one of these topics in the future, which one would you be most interested in attending? Something around maybe renovation projects, or I should say integrated project delivery. So it says integrated project deliver, but it should say delivery. Maybe something around sustainability, building information modeling, and I can tell you right now, I'm going to go ahead and show the results. Lots of people are answering that BIM category. Maybe tips for residential architecture, tips for interior architecture. So great. Appreciate your responses. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. All right, and I'll just say again, I'm going to hand the floor over to Amy here in a second, but I do want to again mention that we weren't able to address every single question that we got in the survey. We had a lot of great responses, so we did try to lump some of those responses together into categories, and Amy will be talking about those. And again, if you don't see your particular question addressed, please do send that to ask.amy@autodesk.com, and that goes right to Amy, and she'll get back to you. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Amy. Amy, got the floor.
All right, thank you so much, Deb. So today we're talking about the path to BIM for small firms, and I'm going to go ahead and just launch into a PowerPoint for just a minute because there's a lot to talk about and a little bit to show. So the very first thing, and we're on the wrong slide here, let's start at the beginning. The very first thing is this idea of value of BIM, or building information modeling. Why should we do building information modeling? And I saw this a few times in the survey. What's the point? Why? Is that the direction everything's going? Is AutoCAD going away? So I'm going to start by saying AutoCAD isn't going away. It definitely has a huge user base. It has a fit in a market. But building information modeling is here to stay. And there's a lot of people doing it. Now I'm going to take a minute and talk to you about the value of BIM and some of the things that are happening, and I'll do a quick demo inside Revit to show how Revit is building information modeling. But if you go out to the internet, this is not a new concept. People are doing BIM. It's successful. It's happening. We're not on the edge of things anymore. BIM is out there. It is happening, and there is a ton of information. So go to the internet, do a search on Google. You'll find articles, surveys, interviews, all kinds of content related to the value of BIM. And a lot of this content does not come from Autodesk. This is people doing it in practice. So I'll show you some of that in just a few minutes. I'll show you one of the pieces of content you might be interested in. All right, so let's talk about the value of BIM. So some of the things that are going on right now, again, not a new concept, things that are happening is that BIM is helping solve problems before projects go to construction. So a building information model means that your drawing sets are more coordinated. So you're going to find problems in the drawing set with this coordinated 3D information model prior to construction, and a lot of money is being saved doing that. And in turn, your drawing sets are more accurate because they're more coordinated, because you're building the model virtually. A lot of development around green design is happening these days. You hear everybody talking about doing green designs. BIM is really helping move that. BIM allows you to make decisions earlier in the design process, which in turn allows you to be more green because you can evaluate the building properly. Building information models are being used for analysis, so you can take a model, put it on a site, and say, well, this position is going to give me an average energy cost every year or electrical bill every year around this amount. So that's the kind of analysis that you're getting out of information models. And then the last section here is BIM gives you better marketing opportunities. Having an information model allows you to communicate with your clients in 3D. And let's face it, that's what they understand. That's why we spend so much time developing really nice renderings and images for marketing purposes. Well, having a building information model creates that same information much faster and much more easily than what we've been doing in the past. And then design iterations. You can entertain many more options for the facade of the building or interior or floor plan layouts using a building information model, because the way the application works and develops content, it just makes it easier to look at those design iterations and not have to recreate the wheel every time. So those are just some examples of the value of building information modeling. And what I want to do is take a minute and show you inside Revit architecture how the application is a building information modeling tool and some of the things you can do in Revit architecture that maybe you're not doing in AutoCAD right now, or maybe why Revit is our chosen choice at Autodesk for building information modeling. So if you're using Revit architecture right now, and I think I saw 98 people or so online are, you can probably tune out for just a minute because this is a little bit of an intro to how Revit works. But I'll just go through it for a few minutes and you can come back and we'll get more into the path to BIM for small firms and things that a small firm needs to think about. So at this point, I'm going to share my desktop with you and show you the Revit architecture application. Now, as I mentioned before, Revit architecture is the Autodesk solution for building information modeling. That doesn't mean AutoCAD architecture or AutoCAD are going away. Those are applications that are still very strong in the market, but fit more the productivity environment, the environment we've been using for the past 15, 20 years, drafting productivity. Well, those tools fit that need and give architects what they need in that environment. All right, so Revit architecture, looking at the interface really quickly, at the top here, you can see that we have different categories of tools. This whole area is called the ribbon in the newer versions. And these tools allow you to access different commands. So if I go into the door tool, my ribbon changes to give me tools related specifically to doors. So that's where all of your creation happens, is up here at the top. On the left-hand side, you can see this is your project browser, and this allows me to navigate between views that I create for my project. So bold right now is the floor plan view. I could easily switch to a 3D view of my project. Oh, that's not a good choice. Let's go to one that's a little more exciting. So here's a 3D view of this project by switching to that particular view. All of these views are contained within typically one file in Revit, although there are ways to break up models for campus style planning or for large projects. Now, there are ways for multiple people to access and work on a large project, but that's not the topic of this particular webcast. All right, so why is this a building information modeling application? Well, let's talk about views and how everything is connected together. I have a floor plan view, which looks like something you might create inside AutoCAD. I'm going to zoom in here to a portion of the building, and I want to create some additional views. I want to detail this out. I want to section it. I want to further explain it in my drawing set. Well, using Revit architecture, we've built up a 3D model in generating this floor plan. And so creating a section is just a matter of selecting the section tool, positioning the section in the right location or placing the call out. So I'll just pick 2 points to do that. And let's adjust our boundary here. And now that I've placed the annotation, that section has just been created. And it's automatically added to my section list here. And if I just double click on the section head, I don't even have to browse through the list of views. I can bring that section up. So by drawing that section mark, it immediately creates the section through the building. That section mark is connected to the view, that section view. Now let's go ahead and tile these two. So I'm looking at the section I just created and the floor plan view. And you can see that if I take that section mark now and change how it's cutting, that section immediately updates. If I move that section mark maybe closer to those windows, you can see that that section is updating as I make those changes. So again, it's all connected. I'm not going through and drafting line work from the floor plan to create these views. I can create sections anywhere at any time. I can create them to better understand my project, again, going back to having more accurate drawing sets. Let's create another view. I can drop in a camera at any location, any time, and take a look at that particular area. So let's just drop a camera into this room and take a peek at that space. So there's a camera view of the space. Now this particular model has a lot of entourage. It has tables and people and lights and things in it, which make it look really good in 3D. But if you haven't added all of that, you're still going to get a camera view of that space showing the windows and the walls and the things that you have incorporated into your model. This kind of thing is so quick and easy to give to your clients. You can take that picture, save it out as a JPEG or whatever file format you want, a PDF, shoot it over to your client and say, is this what you envision? Is this the kind of space you want to see? And very quickly, they start to see exactly what you're designing rather than showing them floor plans and having to create this sort of image from scratch or as a rendering on a piece of paper. So you drop a camera view in anywhere. Let's do another view. I'm going to create a call out or an enlarged view of this particular area. We'll just draw a rectangle for the space we want to create the enlarged view. Again, we get the call out bubble, and I'll just change the location of it by dragging it. And I'll double click on that call out, and there's my enlarged view. It resets the scale for me. It changes all of the annotation to that scale. It turns off most of the other annotation that isn't connected to this view and allows me to re-annotate to this view. So very quickly and very easily, I've created this enlarged view. It's directly linked to all of the other views, not just the floor plan. It's linked to the camera view, to the section view. Everything is 100% connected. So now I'll tile all 4 views and just prove to you, again, for those of you that aren't currently using the software, just show you that these are truly connected. All right, so I've got my floor plan view, I've got my enlarged view, which again is annotated separately but still connected to the building, camera view, and a section view. Any changes I make in any view update all other views. So we'll take this window, for example. You can see it highlight in all 4 views, and if I delete it, it deletes in all 4 views. If I take this window, and maybe we'll grab it from the section view. So here I am in the section view. If I take this window and change its location, you can see that it updates in all of the views. Or maybe I change the size of it to a different window type. So again, I know that that's not a real practical change that I just made, but the point is it's all connected. It's a single model. A change made once happens everywhere. This is the kind of accuracy and coordination that you need. This is the productivity that you get out of BIM, being able to generate these sorts of views very quickly and very efficiently. Yes, it takes a good understanding of the application to do it, but once you have that understanding, it's very efficient. All right, let's do a little bit more with this as an information model. I've shown you the views, I've shown you that it's a building, but there's all this data that's attached to it. So let's close out of some of these. And we'll focus in on the floor plan for a minute. And let's go to, well, let's generate a schedule. So I go to my view category here, my view ribbon. I can schedule anything, walls, doors, windows, floors, and things don't have to be tagged to be scheduled. They don't have to be told that they're going to be scheduled. They don't have to have data attached to be scheduled. The data is already there. It's a byproduct of what I'm doing as I generate the content. So let's go ahead and create a room schedule. And for my room schedule, I want to see name, number, area, and maybe floor finish. This is the data that's already built into the model by default. You can add more data if you want to. This just gives you a good starting point. I'm going to sort by name, and there's other settings here you can control as well. So I'll go ahead and press OK. And it's created a room schedule for me. Now, I don't currently have any rooms, and I purposely did that to show you how information gets input and how it affects these schedules. So as I create, the data is automatically being tracked. The schedule is just a query or reflection of that data. All right, so let's create some rooms. So I'll go back to my home ribbon, come over to the room and area section, and grab my room tool. The room tool will automatically look for boundaries to create rooms, and you can sketch in your own boundaries to divide up spaces. But all I have to do is pick, and it creates the tag for me, and it identifies the room as part of the project and gives me some of that data. So there I've created a few rooms, and that schedule is being populated. I could delete that schedule right now and that data is still maintained. It's part of the project because the rooms exist here. Now, I can change data right here on the schedule. Let's zoom in a little bit. I can come over to my schedule and it highlights those rooms for me in the plan. And I can easily change the data here. So I'll call this an office, for example. Or maybe we'll call it storage. That's probably more likely to be a storage room. And this one maybe is an office. And as I start to type this stuff in, it creates a list for me. So now I can just select office rather than typing it. And I can select storage. I can change room numbers here as well, or I can change them on the plan. So we'll come over here and call this, storage room 101, and that's going to update. Now I can input floor finish data if I want to, but I'm going to come back and do that in just a minute. This data can be used to create things like color fills. So let's go to our legends, and we'll just drop in a legend at the bottom here based on the rooms. And then I want to edit that legend. And I'm not moving real slowly. The point here is not for you to learn how to do legends or learn how to create schedules. The point is for you to see some of the power behind Revit as an information model. So I'm going to color these rooms by name. Automatically creates the colors for me. And now it colors all the rooms based on names. If I was to change something, so let's take this office, for example, and make it a storage room, changes the color. If I was to take this storage room and make it a, make it a break room, just to add something new or different. By doing that, it adds a new color to the floor plan, adds a new item to the legend. So very quick, very easy to do. Let's base this on floor finish, and then I'll move on to my last piece of this particular demonstration. So there's no floor finish data. They're all blank, but I can easily come in and say, well, this is going to be VCT, this is going to be tile, maybe this is going to be carpet, and it starts to develop the legend for me and color based on those particular values. That's one example of information being tracked and utilized as part of the project. Let's do another one. Let's zoom in close and just take a peek at one of these walls. So if I select the wall and go into the properties of it, you can see that there's data about this wall. It's a non-bearing wall. You can see the length and the area and volume are input here as well. If I look down at phasing, it has a phase created and a phase demolished, which really allows you to handle renovation projects very smoothly. Now if I go into edit, I can see even more detail. Model, manufacturer, assembly code. You can link these models to applications like eSpecs to be able to generate specifications directly from the model. And I can go in even deeper to the structure of the wall. How is the wall put together? What materials are in use? So for the finished materials of the wall, we could come in and apply those using many different materials that are available within the application. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time getting into the nitty-gritty of this stuff, but these are the sort of things that are input as you work, as you develop the design. Having all of this information available to you is quite often why decisions are made earlier in the process when doing a building information model. Let's create one more schedule to wrap this up, just to show you all the data that's available. I'll go over to my View ribbon, and we'll create a new material takeoff. I can do a material takeoff that looks at all of the components of the building, or maybe I want to look at just the walls. Then I'll come in and specify what I want to see. So I want area, name, and maybe volume. We'll just keep it simple. I want to sort by name, and then I want to see totals for the area and the volume. Again, moving through this quickly, not so you understand exactly the steps, but just so you see the concepts. All right, so now we've created this material takeoff that looks at all of the walls in my model, not just this floor plan, but again, we look at the building as a whole, and tells me exactly the area and volume of each of the components or the materials in use for those walls. So this is the kind of data that you can get. And finally, the model itself can be exported out to applications like eSpecs for those specifications, to Green Building Studio as a GBXML file to do your analysis. There's a lot of different things happening on the peripheral to Revit. So Revit acts as the kind of home base for developing the model, and then there's all these different peripheral applications that allow you to really analyze it and do more with it to go beyond just the design of the project. For, you could use it for facilities management and much more. All right, so hopefully that gives you guys a quick idea of the business value around building information modeling and why Revit is the Autodesk Premier solution for building information modeling. Let's go back now and talk about some of the things that as a small firm you need to think about when making the transition to BIM. And I would assume if you're attending this webcast, you've probably already seen the value in building information modeling, and now you're trying to figure out, how do I make this happen? Small firms often don't have the leeway to throw a couple people at a project or to just play with the application for a while. They have tight timelines, they have tight budgets, and quite honestly, when you're moving to building information modeling, you have to think about things just a little bit differently. So we're going to go through some of those things. These are the 6 items that I want to talk about. So that's not an order of rollout. That's just 6 things that you need to think about. The very first one, and I think this one is probably the most important, well, maybe the most important, is, are you ready? Just because you saw a good demo or you really like the idea of doing building information modeling doesn't mean you're ready. Building information modeling is a technology change, it's a process change, and it's a cultural change. You can't take and fit what you're doing today into a new software application. It just doesn't work that way, and people fail over and over again because they think all they have to do is buy new software and keep doing what they're doing now. So I want to talk just a little bit about these so you understand. A technology change means you probably need new hardware. I don't know. You can evaluate it. We have our system recommendations written down on the Autodesk site. I would suggest going to discussion groups and talking to end users to get better recommendations, more specifically about what does work in practice for them. But you probably want to update your workstations. You want to be proactive about your workstation updates. Make sure you have the hardware in place. And then you also need to look at your network, but you can be more reactive with the network. If you're experiencing slow saves, which, without getting into much nitty-gritty, if you have multiple people working on one project in Revit, it's happening via the network. So you have to have a good network setup in place. So if your network is acting slow or you're getting slow responses in Revit, then you're reactive and you might need to update your network. And then the software, obviously, this is a technology change, it's a software change, that's one we usually expect. All right, it's a process change. The way we do things today, going from SD to DD to CD, the phases we go through, how much time we spend in each of those phases, all of that is more or less turned upside down when you work in a building information modeling environment. A lot of people say they spend a lot more time in the design development phase, a lot more time spent making decisions and developing design iterations, and the construction document phase is minimized because they get so much byproduct in construction documents from that design development phase. You also have to think about your workflow. Workflow meaning, how are you going to communicate with your clients? How are you going to deliver projects now? Yes, you probably are still going to have a printed construction document set, but when you send files over to your engineers, are those files going to be DWG files? Are they going to be models? How are you going to work beyond just creating the model? And then finally, it's a cultural change. What that means is that communication goes way up when we're doing a building information model. Teams tend to talk a lot more because everyone is in the same model at the same time. Everything that I do affects everything you do. So how are you going to communicate? Team structure and roles change. A person that maybe typically was always a drafter and just managed details or sections, that person may have to have a different role when it comes to Revit architecture or doing building information modeling. So those are things that you really have to evaluate. Now, I can't give you all the answers to these things. You're going to have to do some research, some reading. There's tons of stuff out on the web to get a good idea of what will or won't work for you. There's consultants out there, which I know small firms probably can't hire consultants, but if you wanted to, they're available to help you answer these questions specific to your firm. But I will mention that there is a report. It's the McGraw-Hill BIM report, and I have this website, so let me show it to you. So you can write down that link. But here's the website. And basically it's a 52-page report all about building information modeling. That I think even though it's for large and small firms, there's a lot of really good information in here to help you understand what's happening with BIM, where the value is with BIM, where successes and failures are related to BIM. So a really good report that I would suggest taking a look at. All right, let's go back and move on. So ready for BIM, the point of everything I just discussed is that, one, you're going to need money. There's no way around it. You're going to need money to upgrade hardware and software. Two, you're going to need some time. You have to set aside some time, and we'll talk about different ways to get that time, but there has to be some time to be able to make the change. And then finally, the cultural change. In a small firm, it's critical that everybody be on board. In a large firm, if one person says, no, I hate it, I'm not doing it, they can be moved to another studio or put on a different task that maybe isn't involved with the BIM implementation. In a small firm, really everybody has to be on board. That's the only way it's really going to be successful. All right, I want to say number one, probably is way up there with number one, but one of the major things you need to do is you need a plan. And this one just kills me because, as architects, engineers, designers, we are masters of creating plans. That's what we do every day. We're developing a plan for how a project's coming together. But when it comes to our own internal processes, quite often we want to skip this step. We don't want to develop an accurate, clean plan for how we're going to move to building information modeling. Instead, we want to just install the software and do some self-paced tutorials and hope that it sticks. It doesn't work. Time and time again, it doesn't work. You have to have a plan. Now, I know that dedicating a single person to this plan is very hard for a small firm to do, but there should be some time spent working on the plan, and honestly, in a small firm, it should involve everyone, because everyone needs to be a stakeholder in the move to BIM. Everyone needs to understand why it's happening. Again, in a small firm, a single person that doesn't agree can throw a huge kink in the project. They can throw off the entire implementation of building information modeling. You don't want one person to be an obstacle. So create a plan, involve everyone in the plan, and you know what? Make everyone stakeholders. Throw a carrot out there that says, if this BIM is successful, or if we can get projects done faster in the future, or make more money, or if we come up with new opportunities, maybe everybody gets a bonus. Whatever you want to throw out there that puts them, makes them more involved, makes them the stakeholders. The plan needs to include strategies for how you're going to fit in training, and we'll talk more about training in a minute. It needs a strategy for identifying a real project and how to tackle that real project, because there's a good chance you'll spend more time on it than you have previous projects. And then, of course, more in-depth things are, the workflow. What's the new workflow going to look like? And honestly, that's something you can develop over time, but it's a good idea to think it through a little bit at first and start to begin to have a better understanding of that workflow. And again, there's tons of information out on the internet that you can pull around that. And then your plan should also include communication with clients, communication with consultants. For example, on the communication side, if client satisfaction is a huge deal, or you have certain clients that are very important to you, make sure that they're aware that you're moving to building information modeling. Help them understand building information modeling. So again, incorporate that into your plan. Think about that stuff up front. All right. Let's take just a minute here, and I want to show a little bit more inside Revit architecture. And what I want to show is around, communication with your consultants and maybe workflow strategies that you may have to incorporate into your plan, some things you need to understand. And I'm only showing tastes and nuggets of things. There's more that you have to think about, but I have a limited amount of time to go through this stuff. So what I want to take just a minute and talk to you about is the import-export capabilities of Revit architecture. All right, so we have this floor plan here, and I'm going to get rid of this for a minute. All right, so we have this floor plan, and this is our construction document floor plan that we're developing for the project, and I need to be able to share this with my consultants. You could have a clean view of it that you shared with them, or you could have the full view. It's up to you. There's a lot of different things you can control here. But Revit architecture does allow you to export out to DWG or DXF or DGN for sharing with consultants. Now, I'm not saying this is the ideal way to communicate. You have to evaluate this in your plan and figure out what your engineers are using and how you want to do things. But if you choose to, DWG is supported, so you can export or import via DWG. Now, before I actually do the export, I want to show you down at the bottom of the list here are the options for export. So I can go to Export Layers for DWG. And you can see that on the left-hand side, these are all the categories of components in Revit architecture. And then next to that are the layers that they're exporting to, and then the colors of those layers. So Revit architecture has a good understanding of what an AutoCAD file looks like. And so when it exports, it sets things up very cleanly. You can input your own standards here. There's a few of them available that you can load in, and then you can save your own as well. Now I'm going to go all the way down to walls at the very bottom here. There they are. And color 2 is assigned to the walls, which is yellow. And with the new AutoCAD cream background, it just looks horrible. So I'm going to change that to a color 4. By changing the header category, pressing Enter, it changes the subcategories to 4 as well. We'll press OK, and then now we can actually export this floor plan to DWG. Now, there are options in export that can really make this smooth. So I can export the entire set, so I can check which views I want to export. I can save this so that maybe every week you do an export to DWG, or every day, or whatever is necessary for it to work within your office. Now, I'm just going to do this current view to show you the concept. There are some DWG properties you can control. These sorts of things you can tweak and get better with over time, but I still think it's a good idea that as part of your workflow planning, you're thinking about the capability or understand the general capability of being able to export or import. All right, we'll go ahead and export, and I'll just call this, I'll go with the default name. And it takes just a second to export, not long at all. I'll come over here to my AutoCAD and do an open. And let's go to our directory. And there's the exported file. And there's all of the CAD content. So it sets up the layers for me. It exports a 2D Limeworks-based sort of content. So there's the layers, the colors. I don't know if cyan's a whole lot better than the yellow, but there's a dimension, so there's actually a dimension type that gets created. There's blocks for doors and windows. So I would definitely do an export first and evaluate the export so you understand what you're sending to other people. And maybe internally you need to continue using DWG. That could be one of the workflow strategies that you look at. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. All right, you can, of course, import. I'm going to skip that just for the sake of time. And let's go back and talk about a few more things inside our PowerPoint. So again, you need a plan. You can't skip this step. Take some time to do it. Involve everyone in the office. Everyone being involved is critical with a small firm. Now, you need a leader. Now, I know that you probably don't have an IT manager, or maybe you don't have a CAD manager. Quite often, small firms, everybody wears many hats. Someone has to be identified as a leader, though. Someone has to be in charge of making sure that training happens, that the right software is purchased, that the plan you've developed is followed, that there's a way of measuring success. So, maybe they do it part-time, but someone needs to be in charge of it. All right, the rollout. This is another one to think about. When you roll out your BIM implementation, when you make that final move, the biggest thing you're going to need is time. You need time to develop the new techniques for doing BIM. You need time to train your staff. You need time to finish the project on time and make your clients happy. How are you going to get that time? Well, there's a few different things you can think about or try. One is educating your client. If you can sit down, maybe you have a client you've used many times or worked with many times, maybe you can sit down with them and explain that your office is moving into building information modeling. This is the value of doing that. Talk to them about that report, about the successes in the construction industry right now of having a coordinated documentation set. Maybe offer them some renderings, some quick 3D views that you can create from the model at a low cost. There might be ways to convince them to give you one more week on that project to be able to, have a longer timeline to implement building information modeling. Speaking of educating the client, being able to offer some of these things, let me show you how easy it is, and we'll go back to our application for a minute. I'll show you how easy it is to get some nice 3D views out of the project while you're developing the designs, and then also show you that the product has the ability to create some very nice renderings as well from the model. It's not a separate task to create renderings. All right, so I showed you earlier how to drop in a camera and create a 3D view. Well, let's get to the right place here. A 3D view like this one is really just a byproduct of the design. There isn't a whole lot of extra in this particular 3D view. So as you're designing, you can develop a camera view of your model, and I've got one right here that looks at the entry. So you drop the camera in where you want it, look at the right location, and this is what you'll get. Just a couple clicks and you can get something like this from the development of your design. Now, if you want to turn this into something you can give your client, there's a couple things you'll want to do. First, you can select this frame, and on your ribbon there's a crop size. And this crop size will allow you to change it to something bigger, like a 20 by 16, so we'll double it in size. And let's cancel that. I want to lock it as I do it. One more time. So pick the boundary, then hit your crop size, and you want to scale it. That way the image gets bigger with it as well. So 20. That should change it to 16. So changing that crop size allows it to be larger if you want it to, so that you can stick it on a 24 by 36 inch sheet or whatever sheet size you're looking for. And now we want to add some detail to it. This looks pretty good. But you can easily come in and go into your graphic display options and maybe turn on a gradient background. You can set your sky, horizon, and ground color. And again, we're not getting into a lot of detail, but that just makes the image pop. That's kind of fun. Let's go back into our display options and maybe turn on shadows. So we'll tell it to cast shadows. We can determine how light or dark the shadows are. And then we can also go into the settings and set a location, a date and time, and get kind of detailed about how these shadows look. I'm just going to go with the defaults. You'll get the idea. Now shadows take just a second to regenerate, so I'm probably going to turn those off for the sake of the webcast. But now you can see that the image starts to pop a little bit more. If the front of the building is too much shadowed, I can easily go in and make those adjustments. Now I'm going to turn shadows off. Again, because they take a second to regenerate. But you can also come in and you can turn on shading with edges if you want to show a little color. You can go back into your display option and turn on silhouette edges, which will add a nice dark line to some of the edges, again, to make it pop a little bit more. So this isn't a rendering. This is quick, easy 3D imagery. So you could show the client this and say, this is the kind of byproduct of developing an information model. And I can give you, 4 of these at no cost for each corner of the building. They might be very interested in something like that. All right, one other thing you can do that your client might be interested in to help you sell them on BIM and get a little more time for the project is the 3D model can be exported out to a DWF file. So export DWF. I've already done this. It's quick and easy, but I've already done it. DWF can be viewed with the Autodesk Design Review software. This is free, and if they're on newer versions of Windows, like Vista, then all they have to do, you don't even have to download the file. All they have to do is double-click on the DWFX file, and it will launch the viewer, or prompt them to launch that viewer. So here's the 3D model, and this is very lightweight. This is like 300K or something, just really small. I can easily grab my navigation tools, and let's get the full navigation wheel here, and kind of orbit around that model to take a closer look at it. I can slice the model up. So let's say for my tools here, I want a section from the top down. I can grab this little section mark here and just slice that. And then we'll zoom in, and we can pan around looking at those spaces, orbit around if we want to get a little better look. So this is a great way to really explore the design and what's happening. Now you can take it even further. Again, this is an information model, so I can select on any of the items. So I can just pick this rack here, for example. And let's pull up our model data. And all of the components of the model are listed here. So with that shelf selected, it tells me exactly the size of the shelf. I could come over here and maybe pick, let's see, what's something that might have some data attached. So here I select that. It tells me it's a refrigerator. You could attach more data and have it say what type of manufacturer of the refrigerator, whatever information you want to input. Let's grab a wall. If I pick the wall, I get some data about that wall, the area, the length of the wall, the volume. So this is a great way to really evaluate the design, and you could commit to providing these to the client, again, to get a little more time. And not hard to do. This is what you're developing just working in Revit architecture. All right, let's move on. The last item in the rollout portion of this that I want to mention is, again, that with a small firm, everyone needs to be involved and committed to the change. They need to be stakeholders. If a carrot needs to be put out there, then do it. If you see enough value in BIM, then it's worth it to put the carrot out there. If the carrot exists, if there's some extra money for them at the end of the year, if things go well, you might be able to convince your team members to put in some extra hours. Maybe a couple hours on a Saturday to get the training in, or maybe they stay in the office during lunch and sit through training every day on that particular project and where things are at. So having everyone involved in a small firm really makes a huge difference. All right, this one is huge. I went through the survey information, and several times the question was, how do I get training without going to formal training? How do I, where do I get self-paced tutorials? Where's the free content? I understand that training costs money. I understand that training takes time and that this is a difficult item for a small firm. But the first line there, training is the leading indicator of a successful transition to BIM. Leading indicator. That means if you don't get properly trained, you probably won't be successful. And I'm not just telling you this because I think that's what's going to happen. I'm telling you this because that is what happens time and time again. You have to get trained. Now, don't think that some self-paced tutorials during the week, every morning or something are going to cut it. You need formal training. You need someone who's done this, someone who understands more than just the application. They understand the use of it in practice to do the training. You can get one person trained and have them train the office. That's fine with me. I think having someone else come do the training is probably a good idea. There's two strategies for training. One is to train first, get the entire office trained, not just a couple people, the whole office. Again, for a small firm, it's got to be everybody. Get the entire office trained and then start the project. If you do this format, make sure the project starts right after the training. There can't be a gap in time or people will forget. I think you need, at minimum, 24 hours of formal training. That can be 3 days in a row. It can be 4 hours, half a day for a few, weeks, whatever you have to work it out. But I think at minimum you need 3 days. And then again, start the project right after. The other way to do the training, which might be more interesting to a small firm, is to train and start the project simultaneously. The idea here is that training happens while you're doing the project so that you can be trained on items in the application that match the current phase or whatever you need to do. The nice thing about the way doing this form of training is that you get hands-on practice right away, that you can fit in small bites and pieces throughout the project, and again, you're going to need a little more time on that project to be able to do this. It also allows you to get questions answered when necessary. So if you're going through the project and you run into, a wall, you can't figure out how to get something done, hopefully you have training coming up that week where you can get some help on how to get past that particular wall or problem. So those are two ways that work really well for getting training implemented or set up. Again, start training first, then the project, or do train and the project at the same time. I know it takes time and I know it costs money. It's a sacrifice you have to make. So if you're not ready to commit to training, then you're not ready to do building information modeling. As simple as that. Now, I did add a link down here that you can get to find a local reseller who can help you get the right resources to get trained. All right, so that's my training pitch. We'll move on. Oh, one more comment I wanted to make about training. For a small firm, training is actually easier than a large firm. Training a small firm is better because you have more generalists. Everybody's typically going to be trained on pretty much the same stuff. In a large firm, you got the guy who just does design work or the guy who just deals with sustainable design, and they're not going to need the same training as everyone else. So a large firm really has to develop many different training curriculums to make those needs. You don't have to do that. You just got to come up with one training strategy that probably will work for everyone. And then last thing is that you need to involve management in training. They're part of the entire team. They need to understand what's involved in the project or moving to BIM. And then management is also very good at recognizing new opportunities. So if they go through the training, they're quite likely to do that in the process. All right, last thing you need to think about is post-implementation. You hopefully have taken everything I've said seriously and that you're going to go do these things and figure out how to get the time and get the money to make it happen. And after it's all done, you need to take the time to review the gains and losses, obviously, so that you can make adjustments for current and future projects. And as a team, you should come together and see if there's any additional services or capabilities that are now available to you. You may not identify those on the first project, but there's a good chance once you start to build some comfort doing building information modeling, there will be some ideas that come up. And as a team, you can evaluate and come up with those capabilities. And then staying ahead. This is a big deal. There is so much stuff on the web. This is an information world we're living in these days. There's so much information out there that you need to stay on top of it. You've got to get involved with reading blogs, regular articles, get on discussion groups. There's so much stuff out there that you've got to figure out how to spend 1 hour a week going through this stuff or reading something or educating your office on something. And then you also need ongoing training. The application is changing, every day. Internally, we're developing new stuff every day. We're releasing regularly new versions of the software. If you're on subscription, we're releasing tools on a regular basis. So you need to stay on top of things as far as the application goes. And then BIM is brand new to the industry. Even though people are using it and doing it, it's new as far as what its capabilities will be in the future. So you need to stay on top of what's happening with BIM in the future and where things are moving. But here's the truth of it. As a small firm, you have a competitive advantage over a large firm if you successfully make it through your implementation. A small firm has the agility to quickly make changes. They're nimble. They can adjust to something that's happening in the industry very, very quickly. A large firm is like turning a huge ship. It takes a lot of planning and process change and getting approvals to make any sort of change. Small firms don't have to go through that, but you got to get through the initial implementation and move to them to be able to make those quick, nimble changes to new markets and be competitive with those large firms. All right, my final slide, and then I'll turn it back over to Deb to wrap things up. This is my motivating quote, and I'll read it to you. It says, change has a considerable psychological impact on the human mind. To the fearful, it is threatening because it means that things may get worse. To the hopeful, it is encouraging because things may get better. To the confident, it is inspiring because the challenge exists to make things better. So I would hope that based on all the information I've given you, you can feel more confident about building information modeling and inspired to take on the challenge and improve your workflow and make things better and hopefully see new money-making opportunities. With that, I thank you so much for listening to me, and I will turn it back over to Deb Dabrowski. Oh, I had one more slide I forgot. This webcast is being recorded, and it will post to our resource center. So it's autodesk.com/architecture center. So you can go back and view this webcast at any time and go through the content again. You can also follow us on Twitter. We like to post any new content or information you might be interested in. And then if you have questions, Deb mentioned this earlier. We did the small firm survey. There are a lot of questions. We didn't answer all of them in the presentation, but tried to. If you want to send me a question directly, please feel free to. Autodesk.com/askamy. And again, thank you so much. Deb, you have the floor.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks for that great presentation. And I really liked that inspiring quote at the end, all about change. And again, I do want to reiterate that the Resource Center that Amy just showed you, and I'll show you the link to that again in case you didn't get a chance to jot it down, but that Resource Center has a ton of great information. So this webcast is specifically about small firms and getting to BIM. We have a bunch of other information on that Resource Center that's applicable to small firms, large firms. There's tons of information about BIM there. So that's a good resource for you as well. Okay, so I also just want to mention really quickly, we asked before a polling question about what is the size of the firm that you work for, and I know there are several people out there that are between jobs. I want to mention that the Autodesk Assistance Program, this is a great program to help displaced architecture professionals keep your skills up to date. It offers free Autodesk software. There's free online training. You can learn actually quite a bit about Revit and BIM through this program. So if you qualify or you know anyone who qualifies, we have thousands and thousands of people that take advantage of this program. So go to autodesk.com/assistance. Okay, and I know we're at the very top of the hour. I want to leave you all with just a few links to additional information here. Again, the Architecture and Design Visualization Resource Center can be found at autodesk.com/architecture center. So if you go there, you might want to bookmark it. That's the place where we post all of these past webcasts. This webcast will be posted up there. The recording will be in 3 or 4 days. We also encourage you to test drive Revit architecture. So if you're on AutoCAD architecture now, you want to just try it out. You can try it for 30 days for free. And you can download that trial on the Resource Center or at autodesk.com/RevitArcTrial-download. Here's the links again to ask Amy your questions in case you missed it before, but it's ask.amy at autodesk.com, or another way to get to the same place is at autodesk.com/askamy. We also have this great online interactive tool. It's called Building with BIM. It asks you a series of questions, and one of the questions is about the size of your firm. So if you're a small firm and depending on what products you use and what you're interested in, it'll give you kind of a customized BIM story. So you can get to that tool by going to autodesk.com/BIM interactive tool. And lastly, if you have questions about BIM in your workplace or about Revit in your workplace or about training, Amy talked a lot about training, we encourage you to contact your local Autodesk reseller. If you don't know who that is, go to autodesk.com/reseller, enter in your zip code. You'll find a reseller in your area, or you can call that 800 number. But your reseller is always your best source for information about training and about our products.